Good morning, everyone. So we are learning a mimer we started before. It's a mimer Pashas Emor, written by the Alter Rebbe. It was said by the Alter Rebbe, and the mimer deals with the description with the pasuk in this parsha that describes the avodah, the service that was done on Shavuos. So, what was done on Shavuos? It's to bring kvasim, sheep, and 2 loaves of bread, and the Kohen had to wave them. Vehnif Hakohen. Kohen would wave them. So to catch up on this, you would need to watch part 1. But today, previously we learned that the waving of the sheep is elevating them back to their source and roots. And in this chapter, he will explain why the waving was specifically done with the bread and not with other things. V'hainu im halechem. So the elevation of sheep to be nullified and united with the infinite light of God was done with the 2 loaves of bread. Now we have to understand how 2 loaves of bread can elevate the sheep to their source. So the Alter Rebbe is going to explain to us what is the concept of 2 loaves of bread, what do they hint, and what's the purpose of waving them. The reason why we would wave the 2 loaves of bread, 2 loaves of bread are hinting on or implying one for the written Torah and one for the oral Torah. It's written in Mishlei. King Solomon said, "Lechu lachmu velachmi." Go, fight with my bread. Lachmu can be translated in many ways. Belachmu belachmi, which means the Torah was compared to bread, and the 2 loaves within the bread of Torah. There's 2 levels. Lachmu belachmi is referring to 2 loaves, two breads. Kihen bechinos gevois, referring to bechinos gevois, lofty levels. So the bread that is in the Torah is not referring to the chokhmah of Torah, the wisdom of Torah alone. Rather, it's referring to higher levels. So when you say that there are 2 levels in Torah, two concepts in Torah, it might sound that they are the same, on the same level, meaning the oral Torah and the written Torah. And he's going to explain that the truth is that they are equal, but one has something that the other doesn't have, meaning written Torah has something that the oral Torah doesn't have, and the oral Torah has something that written Torah does not have. Sheyesh b'Torah shv'chtav mashem b'Torah sheba'al peh. Written Torah has something that the Torah sheba'al peh, the oral Torah, does not have. V'yana telmim. What is it? The trop. Sheb'Torah zarko, makaf, shefa, hoylech, segolta, shem bechinas nigun. All the tropes, all the constellations, bechinas mesikus v'tainug, which are adding delight and pleasantness and pleasure. Well, zenema vayishira chamish olef. It's written in Melachim about his song was Chamisha V'Elef, which is 1,005 or 1,500. Uvalaylo shiro imi, and at night the song is with me. That constellations are like song and melody. Nagen b'shiro v'zimro mirov simcho v'tainug, to play, to sing with melodies and joy and pleasure. So the special uniqueness or advantage of the written Torah is the cantillations that it contains, that it has. And the melodies bringing to sweetness and pleasantness. And so the cantillations, if so, the cantillations are revealing the delightness that is in the Torah, the pleasure in the Torah. The concept of delight is even greater. It's something very lofty. It's connected with Kesser, with the crown that is above Chochmah. So, like we see with a human being, that when you have fun or when you have enjoyment, your entire body is happy, not just one part over the other. These traps are, these cantillations are only in Torah Shebechtav, in the written Torah, and not in the oral Torah. The oral Torah does not have, not only that it doesn't have cantillations, but it doesn't even have the comment explanation on these cantillations that are in the written Torah. That's number one. Number two,
explanations to the cantillations. To the
that's what we just said. That there's no explanation to the cantillations.
No.
In the oral Torah.
I got that, but I mean, in the written Torah, there's explanations why.
No. There's it says Talmud Torah lo nisgalu. The reason why why it's that specific order, what does it represent? Later on, you can find here and there explanations of what it means, but not. It's not really. You said it's not really explained because the cantillations that is in the written Torah are not even written. When you look at the Torah, you don't see cantillation.
I see that. No, right. You don't even, well, in the written Torah, you
no,
don't
even see vowels, right?
When did they start using the trop in the?
It's Meseres from Moshe Messina.
Okay, fine. I didn't know.
Yeah. So what is the oral Torah for? Explanation of the mitzvahs that are written in the oral Torah, in the written Torah. So these cantillations are only to read the Torah. Torah Sheba'al Peh doesn't have it. No explanations on the cantillations. So from the fact that it's not explained, the Ta'amim, the cantillations are not explained in the oral Torah, it tells us that this is something that is exclusive to the written Torah. Shepirush uviu zeh u b'Torah Sheba'al Peh davka. This explanation is primarily in Torah Sheba'al Peh, in the oral Torah, meaning the explanation of the mitzvahs, v'lo b'Torah Shebechtav, not in the written Torah. כי אין שום מצווה בתורה שבכתב שלא תהיה צריכה לפירוש וביאור תורה שבעל פה. כיצד תהיה דרך עשיית המצווה ואיזה אופן. You don't have even one mitzvah in the written Torah. It doesn't need the explanation of Torah שבעל פה, the oral Torah. Even if it says kabed avicho v'simech, honor your parents, you still have the explanation of what it means to honor your parents. You know, this could be one guy thinking he's honoring his parents and he's really doing the opposite.
Right.
How do you know? So, everything needs explanation. Every single mitzvah needs explanation in the oral Torah. So, what do we find? What is the mitzvahs? The mitzvahs is the will of God. Cantillations is we said, is tainug, is pleasure. So Torah Shebechtav, the written Torah, is connected with pleasure, and Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah, is connected with Rotzin, with will. Now, Tainug and Rotzin are both of these things, will and pleasure, are in Keser, on the crown. They're above Chochmah. Your Chochmah, your wisdom, is merely serving your Rotzin. Your Chochmah, your mind works for your Rotzin. Right? You want something, your mind starts to spin how to get it. So who is working for whom? Your mind works for the Rotzin works for the mind. The mind works for the Rotzin. What does it show? The Rotzin is higher than the mind, higher than the Sechel, intellect. So over here also, we have these two levels that are above Chochmah. Tainug and Rotzin above Chochmah. When you want something, you can say that only your hand wants it. The entire body wants it. You have pleasure. It's only one limb is having pleasure. The entire body is having pleasure. With Shavuos, what happens Shavuos? Shavuos manifim beis bechines halechem lamaylo v'mkorim l'shoshen. In Shavuos we wave the two loaves, right? Two loaves we said is two loaves are representing Torah Shebechtav, the written Torah and the oral Torah. But we wave them on Shavuos. Shtei halechem, the two loaves on Shavuos. To where? We wave them because we want to elevate them to the source and root. To be united with the infinite light of God. There they are united in the ultimate unity. Hashem and His Chayos are one. Where there is the known, He's the knower, He's the knowledge, and so on. So the point is that they are being uplifted. The Rotzin and the Tainug are being uplifted into Keser. Because it's two levels within Keter, Tainug and Rotzin. Because Tainug and Rotzin, the way they are expressed, they're expressed differently. Two different things, right? But he wanted to tell us that this Havdalah, this separation of Tainug is one thing and Rotzin is something else. It's only as they come down, but in the source they are one. When we take the two loaves of bread, we are uniting Torah Shebechtav and Torah Shebal Peh. We're connecting the Rotzin and the Tainug together.
The Rotzin of the Torah Shebal Peh and the Torah Sav.
Correct. Rotzin is found in Torah Shebechtav, in Torah Shebal Peh, the old Torah, and the Tainug is found in Torah Shebechtav.
So we united to the Tainug and the Rotzin.
Remember correct, but remember that the constellations are in written Torah, and that's why the Tainug is there. Okay. And the oral Torah does not have constellation, therefore it's only Rotzin. Why? Because it explains the mitzvahs. What is the mitzvahs? Mitzvahs is the Rotzin of Hashem.
Okay.
The idea of waving the two loaves is to elevate them higher than the Torah, to the source of the Torah. Now we can understand why the elevation of the sheep to the source and root is being done through the two loaves of bread. In Seder Ishtalshelus, Chochmah is higher than Midas. That's what we said before, the difference between Keves and Kesev. If the base is Chochmah, Bais, Chochmah Bon, so base is Bais, and base is home, base is wisdom. Shin is 3 lines, is the motive attribute chesed gvul tiferes. The way it is down here in Seder Ishtalshelus, in the regular order, Chochmah is higher than Midas. But in the source, Midas, the supernal source of Midas, is higher than Chochmah. So when Chochmah, the wisdom of Torah, is ascending to its source to be one with godliness, that's with the concept of waving the two loaves. The Midas are also ascending to their source. And that's the concept of waving the kvasim under the bread, meaning the bread is on top and the two loaves are on top and the meat is underneath. That in the elevation of Chachma to when elevating the Chachma, which is higher than Midas, down here, the Midas are also elevated, but they're elevated to be higher than Chochmah, which is the level of Ksovim. Kesev, not Keves. V'lochin, b'shtei halechem d'shvuos, ksiv, it's written about the two loaves of bread that it has to be chometz. Chometz teofenu. You see it in the text? Yeah. Chometz teofenu. Yeah. It have to be chometz. Why? All the other menachas, they have to be matzah. This has to be chometz. Even says kol se'or le'saktiru, you should bring a se'or or barley. But this chometz teofenu. שמאחר שמיסה למוקר אחר שמוקר אחר שמיסה ולא מסני פרודי. יש מעין ומכינס המסנס ומסילום שזהו חיוסום ויסבוסום. Since it's ascending to the source of chayus, ומקר החayus and the source of vitality that gives life to the separated world, ex nihilo, it has to be misnas, it has to rise. שזהו חיוסם ויסבוסם, שמחמה שמסנס ומסתרק ממנו ברוך הוא למיילו, ואין מסנס וממש לא כן ניסה בחיוסם וקיום וכנס נפרודים לסדובו יש בפני עצמו. So the only reason why he can give is because of the isnasus, meaning if he stays with you in the same level, you can receive from him because he's way too high. His level is way higher than you. Even if he lowers himself to you, the only way for him to give you is to be misnasa, to remove himself from you, and then he can give. Then he can give you without you being harmed by it, or being capable of sustaining it. So because of the exaltness, so what does chometz do? Chometz is also being exalted, is right. Puffing up. Right. Sometimes for godly levels to give you, they have to puff up. They have to remove themselves from you in order to give you. Right. They're staying on the same level as you, they can't give you. You can't receive from them. He says, in order for Hashem to create a separated world, His light needed to be removed. Otherwise, it will be felt in you, godliness, and there'll be no free choice anymore. You'll be nullified to Hashem by default, not something that you worked on. Now, once they're elevated to the source, misnase, His exaltness, nasu gam heim v'chinas is nasu shelamaylo ma'achar shenichlu v'zachlu v'kir mamish. So they become also misnase, the two loaves. The two loaves are ascending to their, being elevated to the source. Okay. And they are in a state of isnasus, a state of exaltness, and they become the source. Gam heim nasi k'ma moker, they become also like the source. The idea is to bring them to the source, to make them like the source. And the source is misnasa. So the bread is also has to be in a state of isnasus, a state of puffing up. We can see the difference between the sheep of Shavuos and the sheep of of the Talmud that was bought every day. What's the difference? Kishnei kivs haseres em shlomim, anechom lo beolim, ashen kivs hatmidim, layim em oilos. The Talmud is oila, burnt offering. The sheep of Shavuos is shlomim, peace offering. Why? Because let's say the objective is different. When it comes to the Korban Tamid, the emphasis over here is on elevating. You take the Tamid, you bring it on the altar, and it's completely consumed. When we talk about Shlomim, Shlom is the opposite, to bring it down. Bring godliness down. Bring it down. I want the Kohen to eat it. Shlomim. Peace offering. Kohanim has to eat it. Tamid is a kevis that is kvosim nimshochem lemata lo yom pirud. ואזי אי אפשר להאכיל לבעל, שלא ימשוך למטה מטה יסר, יאחיז וניגע סרח וצריך לזכור הכל. Now he says something else. So why don't we eat the Talmud? Because if you would eat the Talmud, the other side will have nurturing. Will get from it. The Sitra Acha will get from it. It's like what happens when we eat? We take the energy, we bring it even lower. Ultimately, it's elevated, but you bring it even lower. So there's a concern that it will be what is called in Chassidus Yenika Saklipris, that the other side will have Yenika, will be getting from it. That's why the Talmud, the Baalim don't get anything from it. The owners of the Korban, those who bring the Korban, which is a communal offering, but no one eats from it. Aval, when it comes to the sheep of Shavuos, Aval kivse atzeres shem al lechem abikum nuchol lifnei Havai. When it comes to the sheep, that the bread was brought on top of them, they're being elevated lifnei Havai lemailo v'mikerim levchinas ksovim. They're being elevated to the source, to the level of kesev, where midos are higher than chokhmah. The shin is representing the midos, the three lines of the shin, chesed, gvura, tiferes, are higher than the base, which is chokhmah. In that place, since it's being elevated to such lofty place, the klippos don't have any kind of nurturing. They can't get anything from it, and that's why we are allowed to eat the korban shlomim. The kohanim were allowed to eat the korban shlomim, allowed to eat the two sheep that were brought on Shavuos. And that can be eaten even by the owners of the korban. So this kivse atzeres means the sheep of Shavuos, right? They are ascending to the midos are ascending all the way to Keser, and there everything is united with godliness. There's no nurturing to the other side, so there's no problem with eating them. You can eat the shlomim. Even more so, it's a mitzvah to eat the korban. And that's the maimer on Vehnif Hakohen. So if we summarize in 2 words, we'll summarize what we learned. The maimer was focusing on explaining the spiritual meaning of the 2 loaves of bread and the sheep that were offered on Shavuos. Why do we need sheep specifically, and why? Could have been a goat, could have been a cow. Why sheep? Number 1, and why chametz? Why the 2 loaves of bread? They had to be specifically chametz and not matzah. And then why the Kohen needed to wave them? Why the sheep that were bought for the Talmud, it was bought in the morning and the afternoon, where they were korban ola, burnt offering, and the Shavuos sheep are shlomim. Right? So all these questions. So he says, to explain all of the above, we need to understand the purpose of the creation of the world. The purpose was to impact the lower world, impact the Olam HaTachton, which is the lowly world, that it would have bitul to Hashem, would have nullification to God. This is Tachlis Brias Olam. And the purpose is to come to the ultimate bitul. What is the ultimate bitul? Remember? It's two types of bituls, general types of bitul. One type of bitul is that I have an agenda and you have an agenda, but since I respect you, so I will help you with your agenda.
Right.
So I'll help you. Now, another type of bitul is it's like the nullification of the limbs of our body to our mind. Like my hand does not have an agenda. Whatever my mind decides that my hand will do, that's what my hand does. And there's no hesitation, and there's no debate between the mind and the hand or the feet or any limb in the body. So that's the ultimate nullification. That the limbs of the body follow immediately. Why? Because they don't have any will of their own. Whatever the mind wants, that's what they want. Imagine we can get to this type of bitul with Hashem. But it's something that requires work because it's not natural to us. So we learned in the mind, but this is not something natural to us. So the concept of offerings that you bring the animal on the mizbeach, on the altar, we are elevating the vitality of the animal to its source, to its root. To the Ein Sof, to the infinite light of Hashem. And why sheep? Because sheep represents the ultimate bitul. Who has the most nullification out of the animals? Not the goring ox, and not the goats that are running in the head, usually running always in front, the black ones or whatever. But the goats are more aggressive. There's even prohibition to a race goat in Eretz Yisrael because they climb all over the place and they can steal from other people's fields and so sheep are docile. They're very. That's a Yaakov dealt with the sheep because also represent rachamim, represent mercy. Their sound, the way they are moving, the sound is very similar to a cry.
Yeah, bad.
Yeah. So since they're representing chesed as opposed to gevurah, kindness versus severities and sternness, kvasim represent chesed. That's why they were brought on Shavuos, and that's the difference between keves and kesev. Kaf, bet, sin is keves. Sometimes in the Torah it's written the other way around. It says, "Ve'es aksovim ifrid Yaakov." Yaakov separated the ksovim, not kavosim, which means that in the source of keves, coming from a very lofty place, and in its source, the midos, the shin, which represents the sin, represents the midos, is higher than chokhmah. So Yaakov elevated Ifrid, did the separation and elevation to their very root and source. And that's what we do in Shavuos. We elevate the Torah Shebechtav and Torah Shebal Peh back to the source, where Rotzen and Tainug can be one, they can be together. Torah Shebechtav is the Tainug, Torah Shebal Peh is the Rotzen, the will of the mitzvahs, explaining all the mitzvahs, and the idea is to bring them back together where it's all one. There's no distinction between the two. Where is it? Because Rotzen is one thing and Tainug is something else. Where do you have it? In Kesser. The point is to bring it back to Kesser. But the reason why we eat, first of all, why is it chametz? So why does it have to be chametz? Because you have, in order to bring something down, you have to have isnasus. you have to have exaltness. And Hashem, to create a world, a separated world, he had to remove himself from the world. Removing myself from the group, it means it nasus. You have something that the group doesn't have. You don't feel belong to the group because you are maybe on a higher level. Doctors usually hang out with doctors. Entrepreneurs hang out with entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And carpenters hang out with carpenters. Right? General.
Yes.
Yeah. Where would the guy feel in his comfort zone? What doctors have more in common with other doctors?
Yeah.
They have maybe sharing patients. They're referring patients.
The conditions and all that stuff.
And they can talk to each other and know what
shop,
they're saying.
as they say.
What?
Talk shop. You know, talk shop. Okay. Okay, let's go to the car. So the carpenters, they can talk about the wood and the tools. Right. So they know what
talk about
the saws and all
the viruses,
all the things, and
yeah. So that's their shop. They talk shop.
The doctors will say, about the diseases and the treatments and the
patients,
chemicals and all this stuff. So back and forth, and then the liability. They sometimes maybe they're talking about malpractice.
Yeah. So, in Shavuos, we asked a question. So why do you need chametz? So it needs to be chametz because chametz is rising, right?
Right.
Dough is rising. It expresses its nasus. So it says, in order for the kali levels to come down, they have to be in a state of isnasus, a state of rising, removal, and then they can give. If they're coming down the way they are, like they are pairing with us on the same level, we can't get much. But if they remove themselves from us in a state of isnasus, then we can get. But the point over here is that we ask the question: why isn't it like the korban tamid, that it's burnt offering ola versus shlomim? Why is korban, the two offerings of Shavuos are shlomim? So we explained that we're trying to bring it down. In korban ola goes up because we have a concern that if you would eat from it, there might be nurturing to the other side. But since shlomim is ascending to such high level, there's no concern that anybody will get from it anything, and there's not only that you can eat from it, rather it's a mitzvah to eat from. So that's in general the idea of what the Torah is telling us. Vehnif Hakohen Likuti, the Kohen should wave them. Al lechem, putting the lechem, the bread of the bikurim, the first grain. They were bought. They made the 2 loaves of bread. Tenufa lifnei Havaya al shnei kvosim, waving it before Hashem on top of the 2 sheep, was to elevate the Torah shebichtav, Torah shebal peh, which are represented by the bread, and to elevate the sheep, the keves, into his source, into his level of kesed, and then bring all that down to us so we can eat it also. And by eating it means that we are getting it, and not just receiving, but we are taking it in. We are digesting it, permeating it. Okay. Bruchim Tiv.